Okay, so since it's already time, I'm just gonna jump in and then people might join, as we go, and that's fine too. All right, here's Kathy. Hold on. There's Kathy. Hi, Kathy. All right, so let's get started. Let's get started. I always start the webinars with some questions because I want to get your guys' brains engaged a little bit. So feel free to, answer the questions either via the chat window or you can just raise your hand or whatever is required. And then if you watch this as a recording, then of course, feel free to also answer these questions at home as I'm posing them, because it engages the mind. So it's a really great way to get started with something like this. So how many of you are familiar with station phases? And it's okay if you're not, right? If you're new to astrology and you don't know quite what that is, we will talk about that today. But I just wanted to get a kind of a sense who is familiar with station phases. Anyone? I know Deb is. So yeah. And Kathy too. Yes, for sure. I know Kathy is too. Exactly. All right, great. So for you, Alan, we're gonna go into that in a moment. Now, how many of you have a sun sign or rising sign in Scorpio? Anybody? Scorpio, yay. Go Scorpio. Rising sign or sun sign? Anybody? I don't think anybody here does. But if you do at home, then for you, this webinar is definitely going to be important since we're going to be talking about Pluto, which rules Scorpio. Now, how many of you have personal planets or angles in 26 to 29 degrees of Capricorn or 0 to 1 degrees of Aquarius? Now, this is getting very advanced here. So if you're not so advanced, ignore this question. But if you know your own birth chart pretty well and you know you have degrees and in those signs, if you have planets in those degrees and signs, actually really take a look at that in your chart, because these are important degrees that we're going to be talking about today. And then how many of you know anything about eclipse cycles? I know Deb does, and I know Kathy does. Alan probably doesn't yet because he's new to astrology, but that's okay. We'll talk about eclipse cycles as well, since the eclipses are coming up. So that's going to be really important. And then how many of you have personal planets or angles in 5 to 10 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius? And 20 to 29 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. So again, this is a more advanced question for those of you who are more familiar with their birth charts and their degrees. Kathy's saying she has both of these. Yes. I do too. I have a lot of 20 to 29 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. I have some 5 to 10 degrees of Leo and Aquarius as well. So these are the degrees that will be impacted by the eclipses. I'm just going to give that away real quick. So if you have anything in those degrees and signs, then the upcoming eclipses will definitely be something you want to hear about. All right. So before we jump in, I just want to thank everybody who's here live for your time, for taking the time to be here, but also for those of you who are watching as a recording. Thanks so much for watching the webinar. And most of you know me pretty well, so I'm going to keep this really brief. I'm originally from Austria, from Vienna, and I've lived in the United States since 1994. And I've been studying astrology since 1991. And I've got a certification for my level 1 astrology in 2005. And I've been doing this for quite a long time. So I find astrology extremely powerful and very accurate. And, even though sometimes it boggles the mind, how it actually works and how it can be so accurate, but it just is. So I've stopped doubting it and questioning it and trying to figure out, what really the reasoning is behind all of this, because obviously I'm a Taurus, so I always like to have concrete evidence for things. But, with astrology, I'm like, you know what, it is what it is. I know it works, and that's that. All right. So today, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So today, eclipse season, which starts this coming week, April 20th, and will last until May 26th. We'll talk about that. Part of eclipse season is the 2 eclipses that will happen back to back, which is the solar eclipse, which is a powerful new moon in 10.5 degrees of Taurus, which will be exact on April 30th. Then the lunar eclipse, which is a powerful full moon that follows the new moon 2 weeks later, 25 degrees of Scorpio Taurus in that polarity. And that will be exact on the night of May 15, 16. And then we'll also include the Pluto station, because the Pluto station will be such a big part of eclipse season. So I will talk about that as well in the background. So that the station, when a planet stations, that means that a planet is slowing down because it's starting to come to a halt, and it changes directions. And as it changes directions, that time frame where it's slowing down, halting, and then trying to speed up again to change direction, that's what we call a station phase in astrology. And it just means that the planet is more exalted during that time because it's moving slower. So the energy feels more vibrant when it's moving slower. And so we get to have a much greater awareness of that planet's energy within ourselves and also out there in the world. So before it goes retrograde, we have the awareness more out there in the world. And once it's gone retrograde, we have a more greater awareness internally, because a retrograde planet always vibrates stronger on an internal level, and a direct planet vibrates stronger on an external level. Okay, so that planet station in Capricorn in 28.5 degrees of Capricorn will be strong from April 15th until May 14th. And it will go retrograde. It will start its retrograde phase on April 29th. And this will be a 6-month retrograde phase, right? The outer planets, and Pluto is one of the outer planets, they move much slower. So they will stay retrograde for quite a long time. So 6 months out of the year, outer planets tend to be retrograde, which means that we have to really integrate the outer with the inner. Every year we have to really find that balance, and integrate internally what we're also experiencing on an external level. So that's what the retrograde phases are for. They're not good or bad. They're just a way for us to kind of find a balance between the yin and the yang, or the outer and the inner, right? You could say. So a retrograde phase definitely has a lot to do with inner processing. Now, I want to thank all of you who have been sending me questions for today's webinar. I've been including them already. At the end of the webinar, we'll talk about those questions with the according birth charts of the people that have sent me their questions. So I'm excited. You have some great questions today. And if there's anything that comes up that you need to ask me about, at that time, either at the end of the webinar, or if there's something very urgent that needs to be addressed during the webinar while we're talking about eclipses and Pluto stations and such, definitely feel free to just write it into the chat window, and I will address it accordingly, depending on the emergency of the question. All right, so let's move to the next page. I have found a new system with my webinar with the pages. So I'm very excited that I'm scrolling now and I don't have to pick the pages anymore, which this is much easier. All right, so I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller here so that we can see the whole page, so you guys can see what's going on in April. So all of you who have received a link to this webinar, you also have some attachments in that email that have the overview of a planetary transits of 2022. And one of the pages is it's for each month, and one of those pages is April and May, and we're going to be looking in more detail at those 2 pages. So I just wanted to briefly point out what's important for us to look at for April and May. So obviously the Pluto station, which I already mentioned because it's slowing down, the eclipse season here, the dates for that, the Pluto station intensifies. So here's what happens when a planet slows down, right? It slows down, and it slows down more and more and more until it stops, right? It's kind of like a train that moves into the station as it's going at its regular speed, but it knows the station is ahead where it has to stop to let in passengers or let off passengers. The train starts to slow down, and it's not going to go from like driving 100 miles an hour to go to 0 in 1 second, and the planet doesn't either, right? So basically the way that looks from the perspective of the Earth, as we're observing it from our own perspective, the planet just slows down more and more and more. So this Pluto's, when I say Pluto station intensifies, that means that it is really slowing down now. Like it's at its very last slowdown before it comes to a halt, right? So these are the dates for that, which means that the planet gets even more exalted, even stronger at that time. And then here we can see it comes to a halt on April 29th. It will go retrograde at that degree until October 8th, where it goes back to 26 degrees of Capricorn, right? So those are the retrograde degrees and phases, how it moves. And then one last thing I also put here is Mercury will enter Gemini on April 29th. And it will have a long phase of going through Gemini, because it will go retrograde between June 13 and July 5th. So actually, hold on. It will be again in Gemini between June 13 and July 5th, but it will go retrograde in between, and move back and forth between 2 signs. So the reason why this is important is because this will also be part of the eclipse charts, the solar and the lunar eclipse charts, and I'll talk about that when we get to the charts. Now we have this powerful new moon solar eclipse on April 30th, which we're going to be talking about, and then in May we have the sun will conjunct the North Node in Taurus on May 13th, and then 2 days later or 3 days later, we have that lunar eclipse in 25 degrees of Scorpio. Now, the reason why that's important is because moon nodes are always connected to the eclipses. And the closer the moon node is to the eclipse, in degree, and I will show that on the chart as well, the more powerful the eclipse and the more visible the eclipse. So as you may know, that not all eclipses are visible from everywhere on the planet. So some eclipses are more visible than others. And then there's also partial eclipses and prenuptial eclipses and all these different types of eclipses. And that has to do with how close they are to the moon nodes. And so therefore, with the lunar eclipse, that's going to be a very powerful eclipse because it's going to be so close to the moon nodes. We have the lunar eclipse that we're going to be talking about. And then, of course, eclipse season ends on May 26th. All right, so let's take a brief look at this chart here. I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. So this here is the solar eclipse chart. And the reason why I wanted to show that briefly is because I just want you to have the visual of how much all of these things are lined up in this eclipse chart. So this is very unusual that we have so many planets lined up next to each other in 2 different signs, right? So there's all this Pisces energy, which we're already experiencing to a certain degree, right? Because Venus is already in Pisces. Mars just entered Pisces a couple of days ago. So we're already feeling all of that. But of course, by the time of the solar eclipse on April 30th, which is only 2 weeks from now, all of these planets will come even closer together and snuggle up together, which means that they really influence each other. And having this many planets in Pisces really means that we need to be really opening our hearts. We need to be trusting life and trusting the process and the flow of things right now. We need to really allow ourselves to feel. And this is not always easy, guys, right? Because in the Western world in particular, we're so conditioned to suppress our feelings or to not be with our feelings or to ignore them or to rationalize or create a narrative about our feelings so we don't have to feel our feelings. We can kind of escape them a little bit. So there's a lot of not trying to be with our feelings in the Western world. And having this many planets in Pisces that we already have and will also have during the solar eclipse requires of us to truly be with our feeling body and also be present with life, be present with ourselves, be present with our higher selves, right? With that higher place in us that is always connected to life and to the universe, right? Because Pisces is sort of like, is the most spiritual of all signs. And if we're not connected spiritually with the energy that's out there in the world and everything that connects everything on an energetic level, we are going to feel a little overwhelmed. We're going to feel anxious. We're going to feel a little out of sorts. We might feel really tired. We might even get sick. We might even have like a cold, a head cold, or something that forces us to sort of go within and get more quiet within ourselves and get more connected to our heart center and to our feeling body, right? So it is always a good idea when there's this many planets in Pisces. It's a really good idea to give ourselves permission to slow down a little bit and to really get connected internally or externally with nature or with life in a very quiet, in a quiet way, but also in a way where we can be very present with life, right? So being present in the present moment is very important for Pisces, because that's where Pisces can really feel the connection to life and the connection to our higher self and to our spiritual selves. So this is part of the eclipse chart. So, and the reason why this is so important is not only because there's this huge lineup here in Pisces, but because Venus is in Pisces, and Venus rules Taurus, right? And so as some of you know, that rulerships in astrology are very important. A planet always belongs to a sign belongs to a planet, which means that when we have something happening in a particular sign, like a solar eclipse in Taurus, then the planet that rules Taurus is going to be an important planet in that chart. And so as we can see, the eclipse being here in Taurus, so Venus becomes very important, and Venus is bundled up right in between Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces, which means that she really needs to trust and connect from the heart. You know, Venus is about relationships. It's about our relationship with ourselves, and it's about our relationship with other people. So we need to have very compassionate, feeling-oriented relationships, something that feel, where we really feel either a spiritual connection, a creative connection, where we feel that we're really wanting to be one, wanting to have sort of this like heartfelt connection with people. With Neptune there, of course, that means we're also going to be very sensitive, right? So there's a higher degree of sensitivity that we're experiencing as people, which means that we need to be really careful with who we're connecting with, right? Because whoever we're connecting with, we will feel them, they will feel us. There's like this intrinsic sense of there's this transparency. And so we need to be very discerning, right, which is a Virgo quality, right? And Virgo is always opposite Pisces. And of course, the opposite of any sign is always what we need to connect with in order to create balance, right? So if there's a lot of planets in Pisces, we need to create that balance with Virgo. So we need to be really discerning who we connect with, who do we let in, who do we want to have a relationship with. And what's my relationship to myself and to my higher self? What's my relationship to life? What's my relationship to presence, being present? So these are all things that we can answer for ourselves now and also at the time of the eclipse. And then also, of course, dreams, right? Remember, Pisces is also connected to dreams, to our dreams that we have about life, to our dreams that we have at night when we fall asleep, when we get unconscious, so to speak, because Pisces has a lot to do with the unconscious as well. So we have to allow ourselves to dream, but we also want to make sure that we don't get delusional about our dreams, that we don't go into la la land or into a place of escapism with our dreams, right? So we want to stay grounded and centered. And see, Taurus is a very grounded sign. It's very much about reality and the physical world, right? The physical body, the planet, the physical life, the enjoyment of physical life and the enjoyment of physicality. So because Taurus and some of these Pisces planets here, especially Mars, is making a nice aspect with the eclipse, that means that we can really ground our dreams, really ground your dreams in reality. You really enjoy your dreams in a very real sense, manifest them, make them reality. Don't stay in the dream phase. Really connect them to the earth, connect them to the ground, right? So that's kind of what this eclipse is about in terms of that connection with Pisces and Taurus. But then, of course, there's two other components here that are very important, which is Pluto will be stationing at the time of the solar eclipse, right? So that's a big part of this eclipse chart. So we all need to really pay attention to where we feel empowered and where we feel disempowered in our lives. And in particular, when it comes to, of course, the area of life where Pluto is in your own chart, natally and by transit, but also in terms of the sign, right? So Capricorn has to do a lot with our collective social structures, right? Capricorn has to do with structures. So we're really wanting to connect with some kind of we're wanting to connect to something out there in the world that we feel passionate about, that we feel like we can build and we can leave behind for other generations, something that is sustainable, something that is empowering, not just for ourselves, but also for others, right? So Pluto invites us to take a look in our own lives, not just in the outside world, but of course, we're going to be seeing it in the outside world as well, because the outside world is always a mirror for the inner world, right? So whatever you're seeing in the outside world that feels disempowering, just remember that that's a mirror for you to also see that there's a part of you that doesn't fully feel empowered within yourself. And then if you see things in the outside world that feel very empowering, then also know that there's a part of you that feels very empowered internally as well. So whatever we see, right, whatever we're being drawn to and whatever we need to pay attention to, it's just an invitation to kind of like bring some awareness to the places in our lives where we either need to acknowledge some kind of disempowerment, or we need to acknowledge that we're not in control of something, because with Pluto, of course, there is this fear. There's a fear of being out of control, right? Pluto wants to feel empowered. So when you don't feel empowered, you feel out of control. So the fear of out of control with Pluto is something that we need to pay attention to. So wherever that fear shows up, we need to surrender that fear, right? The fear of feeling out of control. And we need to get present within ourselves to what we actually have control over, right? So what can we focus our feelings on that we actually have a say over, right? Rather than focusing on all the things, and this is usually stuff that's connected to the outside world, connected to things that we don't have say over, then we don't have control over, right? So we need to be very clear on that and very honest and realistic about that. And we need to take responsibility for the things we have control over, and we have to release the desire to control the things that we cannot control, right? So that's why I have chosen not to watch the news anymore, because I know that that's something I don't have control over. And I also don't know for sure that whatever is being shown to me is really the whole truth and the whole truth only, right? Because of course, when it comes to the media, you know, they will show you what brings the most attention to them and what helps them, you know, have a sort of like more people watch and more people join. So of course they will show stuff that will draw you in. And usually things that draw us in are either really, really good news or really, really bad news. Well, the news tends to give us the really, really bad news usually, because that's the stuff that people get drawn in by, because the mind gets really agitated by that and then wants to sort of like go into problem solving mode. And so, but again, it's stuff we don't have control over, right? So this is just a personal choice that I have made. Feel free to make the choice that you want to be making. But you know, whatever choice you're making, really observe, you know, when you make a choice in terms of like what you want to give your attention to, really observe, is this empowering to me or is it disempowering to me? Does it make me feel passionate about life? And does it make me feel like alive and awake about life? Or does it shut me down? Does it make me feel scared? Or does it make me feel I need to pull up a wall or be more self-protective, right? And so because this is a big part of this solar eclipse, we really want to pay attention to this. And of course, as some of you already know, eclipses, even though they start on a particular day, they have a 6 months cycle. They unfold over the next 6 months after they become exact. So even though this eclipse starts on April 30th, it will unfold until the fall of 2022, right? So these energies here, we're going to be playing with those for about 6 months. And so it's very important to really understand what is being impacted in our own chart by these eclipses, because there is an evolutionary process that happens with eclipses, right? And the reason for that is the moon nodes, because the moon nodes are always closely connected to a new moon or a full moon when an eclipse happens. And again, the closer the moon nodes, the stronger the eclipse. With this solar eclipse, the moon nodes are actually 12 degrees away from the new moon. So 12 degrees means that it's not super close, but it's close enough for it to be an eclipse, where we can still see it a tiny bit, that it's visually an eclipse. Again, not everywhere in the world, but it's definitely an eclipse. So what I was going to say here with eclipses too was that because they're like a consciousness upgrade, eclipses, right? And because they really help us go to that next level of our soul's evolution, it is very important that we really stay very open to that, to receiving that upgrade. this is something I talk about a lot in my weekly forecast when I talk about eclipse season or eclipses. But I just wanted to mention it here in the webinar as well, because it is so important that we truly stay open, because eclipse season can be a time of great uncertainty. And it can be a time where we feel nervous about something because we're getting an upgrade, right? So energetically speaking, the body, the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual body is going through this upgrade, this energetic upgrade. And so there's a part of us that's, because it takes time to receive that upgrade. Usually it starts, a little bit before the eclipse becomes exact. And then, usually about 48 hours after the eclipse has already happened, that's when sort of like the energies are not as strong anymore that come through, that give us that upgrade. So it's like probably like 48 hours before and 48 hours after the eclipse that we're feeling it the most. So in particular, around that time, I would advise everybody to do as little as possible, to really stay very open, to really take care of your physical, mental, and emotional body at that time, in whichever way you can. And to also, as we're going through eclipse season, because eclipse season, of course, lasts a little bit longer than just 48 hours before and after the eclipse. As we're going through eclipse season, to just know that things might shift and change in unexpected ways that you have no control over, basically. And to just think about it in this way, that whatever is ending or beginning is happening for the best and highest interest of you and everyone else involved in your life, right? So just remember that these things, whatever is happening, and sometimes, of course, the human brain can't always understand why things are happening or what the reasoning is behind it. In the moment, the brain can't always understand what it is. But often when we look back, we can really see the higher arc about this, and we can really see the bigger picture much more clearly around why certain things have taken place and why they have happened in a particular way. And so trusting is very important, and of course with a Pluto station, that's something that's very required as well, is to just trust the process. And remember, it's a process, right? Trust the process of all of that needs to be unfolding, that is unfolding. Now, feel free to read more about eclipse season in the weekly forecasts. Of course, I will be talking about it in next week's forecasts. And then, of course, I'm also going to be recording a solar eclipse video, so feel free to watch that as well. That will be posted on April 21st. So that's an extra thing for the eclipse as well, because there's so much more to talk about. I'm not able to get to all of it, right? Now, let's look a little bit at the lunar eclipse before we go into our own charts. Again, there will be a video on that as well, 2 weeks after the solar eclipse video. And this eclipse is exact on May 16th at 15:16 at midnight Eastern time. And this eclipse is also, that's a very powerful eclipse right here, because as you can see, the moon nodes are so close to the moon and to the sun here, which means that this is really where we're getting an emotional upgrade, right? So remember that the solar eclipse deals with more of a new beginnings of some sort, right? The lunar eclipse deals more with relationships and with emotional stuff. So things that are connected to anything in our lives that emotionalizes us. So there can be a reactivity or something going on at the time of the lunar eclipse. There can be an awareness of some sort that we're receiving in our relationships with other people, or with certain situations where we just have this awareness of like, oh shit, this is what this is really about. Right. And of course, with the moon in Scorpio, we might experience that on a very intense emotional level, because Scorpio is very intense. And again, this brings us back to Pluto, because Pluto, of course, rules Scorpio. And even though Pluto is no longer stationing on May 16th, however, it is now retrograde at the time of the eclipse. So there's an internal needing to check in with ourselves, like, where do we feel disempowered? Where in our lives do we need to check more closely at what needs our attention in our lives, and in particular, of course, because we have, so much going on in Taurus, and then we have the Pluto in Capricorn involved. There's a material earthly thing that we need to look at. So it's either going to be our finances, or it's going to be our career, or it's going to be our, where we live currently, like our environment in terms of like feeling grounded or rooted in our environment. The moon, of course, also has to do with family and home sometimes. So there is some kind of intensity that might be going on with that as well. So again, depending on how it connects to your own birth chart and where it lands in your own birth chart, that will indicate a little bit more. And we'll get to that part. But just in terms of this chart, of course, Uranus is again included in this eclipse chart, just like it was with the solar eclipse. And Uranus, of course, ups the ante in terms of unpredictability, right? So eclipse season is already unpredictable, but with Uranus being a part of both charts, both eclipse charts, that creates an even greater sense of maybe feeling a little bit unstable, feeling a little bit wibbly wobbly, whether that's financially or whether that's in terms of like the things that we have, whether that's with our own physical body, right? Because Taurus is connected to our own physical enjoyment of our body. Whether that's connected to the planet, there might be some uncertainty around like the resources of our own planet. So it could be happening in a lot of different layers and levels, right? But you want to, whenever Uranus is involved, you want to make sure that you are that you're really looking what serves me best in terms of recalibrating myself energetically, so I can be ready for my future. Right? Because Uranus has a lot to do with our future. It has a lot to do with our ability to connect to our vision for the future, right? So we need to take a look at what do we need in order to really recalibrate ourselves, maybe on a physical level, but also, energetically speaking, so that we can move into a future that really grounds us in abundance, or that grounds us in enjoyment of the physical world, right? And of course, this is a collective process as well as an individual process. But however, we always want to focus on the individual process first, because the collective process, is first of all, is part of the individual process. As we're focusing on our own individual recalibrating of energies, the collective will benefit from that. And if we're only focusing on the collective, that can be dangerous in the sense that we are not able to always make a difference in the collective right away, right? However, we can always make a difference right away with ourselves, individually speaking. Right. So not to say that you shouldn't want to make a difference in the collective. Of course, that's a beautiful sentiment, but it is important to make sure that we are understanding that each individual is part of the collective. So making a difference individually will eventually also make a difference in the collective. So we don't want to disconnect the two, right? We don't want to disconnect ourselves from the collective and only focus on the collective. I hope this makes sense, guys. Is anybody confused so far about anything that I'm sharing here, or does anybody need to say anything? I just want to make sure before I move forward. And then, of course, with the lunar eclipse chart as well, and I will go into this more in my video as well, is that Venus and Pluto and Mars are the three important planets in this eclipse chart, because Pluto and Mars co-rule Scorpio and Venus rules Taurus. So we have Venus in Aries conjunct Chiron here. So there's definitely some healing, some physical healing that we need to do, and also some healing on around our identity, right? What do I identify as, or what do I identify with as a human being, as the person that I am in this lifetime, and what needs healing around my identity? Where do I feel separate, or where do I feel insecure, or where do I feel wounded in connection to my own identity with myself? The thing that I call Sonja, right? That identity that I call Sonja, because the identity Sonja is really just something that exists, since I was given that name, right? By my mother or by my parents. But before I was given that name, I was already I was already there, right? There was already something there before I even received that name. So we have an identity, right? But we also have something that is beyond, or lives beyond, that identity. So we want to kind of understand that a little bit about ourselves, and really see if we can receive some healing on a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual level, so that we can show up as more whole rather than as the identity that is your name, right? I hope this makes sense what I'm sharing here. And then Mars, of course, co-rules Scorpio. So Mars here is in Pisces conjunct Neptune at the time of the lunar eclipse. So there is a definite need also to really go with the flow, to let the masculine energies within ourselves be much more in a flowy place, allowing there to be a lot of receiving, allowing there to be a lot of just tapping into the energy fields, tapping into our feeling body, and really being in a very creative Zen place almost. Like when you're in this creative place where you just feel like time flies by, and you didn't even realize that an hour had just gone by, and you think it was like 2 minutes. That's a very creative place to be in, and that's like your Zen moment, right? You're in your Zen place when time just doesn't register anymore, right? And Pisces is that type of energy. Pisces is all about being able to be in the moment fully and completely, and just being immersed in the energy of the moment, right? And so we want to practice really immersing ourselves into that energy field before we take action, right? Because the masculine energy likes to take action. But in Pisces, we need to really feel into it before we can take action and go out there into the world. All right, so there will be more in the videos, obviously, but let's go to our own charts, right? So let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see this a little bit better. So these are both my own birth charts. I just wanted to, I always like to show both of them because this one looks so different from this one, but they're both exactly the same. This one is from astro.com and this one is from Time Passages. So whichever chart you have, I just want to say that, they're just visually sometimes a little bit different. So it can be a little bit confusing, but they still show the same information. Now, what we want to do here is as we look at the solar eclipse chart, right? Or as we look at how the solar eclipse impacts each one of us and the Pluto station, we want to take a look at where in our birth chart is that taking place by house, right? And so these are the houses, right, that are The houses are sort of numbered here on the outside, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then here on this side, the houses are numbered on the inside on this chart. So depending on where you have the numbers, they go from 1 to 12, and those are the 12 houses. And that's kind of how you want to look at the chart. So let me just show you before we go into where the transits are showing up. Let's talk a little bit about our natal Pluto, because the natal Pluto, right, will show us where we see the impact of the transiting Pluto, right? So transiting means where it is currently in the sky in Capricorn, right? And the natal Pluto is wherever it was when you were born, right? So in my case, natal Pluto was in almost 2 degrees of Libra when I was born, and it was retrograde at the time I was born. And it was in my 11th house. So that house placement is going to be impacted by the station, by the Pluto station phase, and also by, you know, the eclipses to a certain degree, because the lunar eclipse, for example, has Pluto as the ruler. So therefore it will be impacted by that will impact my 11th house as well, right? So let me just, somebody seems to be unmuted. So let me just mute them real quick. Okay, here we go. All right. So the natal Pluto. So all of you received a handout in the email that I sent that says houses, right? So for each of the houses, there was a handout that says a description of each of the houses. The 11th house is the area of life where we deal with groups of people, networks, like-minded people, our dreams and visions that we share with like-minded people or other people out there in the world. So it's kind of an extroverted energy, extroverted area in our lives where we need to connect with other people and kind of collaborate and have some, it's a very social area, right? The 11th house. Now, having Pluto, which is the planet of empowerment and disempowerment, in the 11th house, obviously means that it's bittersweet, right? There are pros and cons here so wherever you have Pluto in your natal chart, right? Whatever house it's in, it's always going to be a little bit bittersweet, because on the one hand, you want to feel most alive in that house and you want to feel really passionate there, but you also have experienced some trauma or disempowerment in that area of your life in the past. And so there is a little bit of fear there. There's a little bit of trying to protect yourself there as well with this energy, right? So if we go now, and then of course we can also always look at the aspects that planet is also making to your own planets in the natal chart. I won't go into that too much with my own natal chart because it just adds too many layers. It might get a little bit too overwhelming. So here's the houses handout, by the way. And here you can see, 11th house, future visions, wishes and dreams, everything I've said, right? And so look in your own chart, where is this symbol in your own natal chart, and look for the number that it's connected with, the house. And then look in the handout what house that's in, and just know that station will impact that house placement, right? Okay. Okay. So is everybody clear on that? What I'm sharing here with the natal Pluto in the natal chart with the natal house? Hopefully everybody's clear. If you're watching this as a recording and it's not clear, feel free to email me, reach out to me. And if it's a longer conversation, you can always book like a 25-minute reading with either me or Leah as well, right? So let's take a look at the eclipse chart, right? So this is the solar eclipse chart in connection with my own chart. So what I've done here is I've put 2 charts on top of each other. the inside chart here, that's my natal chart, and the chart that's on top, that is the solar eclipse chart. And so what we see now is we see where is the solar eclipse impacting the natal chart. So if you can't do that with your own natal chart, if you don't have a program or whatever, just look to see where is Taurus, where is the symbol of Taurus showing up in your natal chart. And then look to see, or actually, let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see the whole chart. So look to see where Taurus shows up. And then also look at where's 10 degrees of Taurus showing up in your natal chart. And then wherever that is in your natal chart, the 10 degrees of Taurus, then look at the house placement. So in this case, it would be in my 7th house here. I don't think you can read the number 7 very clearly here, but it's in my 7th house. And then again, you go back to the houses handout, and you see what does the 7th house represent, and so that's where the eclipse will be impacting, right? And then you also take a look at where is Pluto showing up, where's that Pluto station in Capricorn showing up, and look for the Capricorn symbol in your natal chart, and then look for the house placement there. In my case, that would be in the 3rd house. And then you go back to the houses handout, right? Look at the 3rd house and see, okay, this is where the transiting Pluto station is impacting my chart, that area of life. And so because I have the 3rd house, the 11th house, and the 7th house impacted here with this eclipse, there is something around one-on-one relationships that is sort of like, there's like a new beginning of some sort, or some kind of shift that I will be experiencing. Something unexpected or new will happen in my one-on-one relationships. And please remember, one-on-one relationships can be any kind of one-on-one relationship. That is personal, business, could be a relationship with a doctor or a healer. It could be a relationship with with someone that you just, a lawyer or an accountant, people that you just have one-on-one, could be a best friend, people that you have one-on-one relationships with, right? So there could be something unexpected, an unexpected relationship that could show up for me within that eclipse season, right? So between April 30th and the fall, October of 2022, something can be unfolding for me in the relationship area that could really ground something in me, that could be beneficial financially, possibly. It could be something that could really also be really good for my career or for my soul's journey, because it's making a trine to my North Node in Capricorn here. But it also makes a sextile to the South Node. So it could be also a lot of support, could be supportive, emotional support. And then it squares my Jupiter. So there might be some need for me to stretch myself in terms of my own perspective of how things should be or could be, or my own visions of the future. I need to maybe just expand myself a little bit in order to allow for that relationship to come in, right? So you can see here what I've done here with this interpretation. Obviously, not all of you might be able to connect the dots as quickly as I can, because obviously I have practice in this. So for you, you might have to go, slowly, step by step. And, depending on how new you are to astrology, you might only look at the house placements, right? You might only look at the houses handout and the house placements. And if you need more, you can always reach out for a reading with me or Leah. Okay. Now, the Venus, which rules the solar eclipse, is in Pisces in my 5th house. So the 5th house will be involved here as well. And then my natal Venus will be involved in the 8th house as well. So there's something in connection with creativity, self-expression, leadership, where I'm stepping more fully into my own and trusting my own leadership, trusting my own self-expression a little bit more, trusting my own creative output a little bit more. And that's also connected to my 8th house and to Gemini. So it could be connected to some kind of communication, teaching, connection that I have with other people, with people that I connect with on a more intimate level, because the 8th house has to do with intimacy. So this could be my clients that I work with on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, right? So it could impact that. Or it could also impact my communication within my own intimate relationship with my husband, right? So there's something that's being impacted here where I can maybe trust myself a little bit more, trust my own intuitive knowing a little bit more as I'm communicating in these intimate relationships, right? Okay, so this is all just so that you can understand what I'm doing here with connecting the dots. And so we'll also go into that in other people's charts as well. We're not only going to use my own chart as we're going to the end of the webinar, but I just also wanted to say here, oh my God, time is flying. So actually, let me move to the next chart because we're already at, it's already 12:30. I didn't realize how fast time goes. So let's take a look at the lunar eclipse chart here in relationship to our own birth chart. So what you want to look for here is, hold on, Audrey keeps unmuting herself. So what we want to look for here is we want to look at where is Scorpio in your natal chart. And so this symbol right here, Scorpio, and then where is Taurus again, because we're still looking at the Taurus, this time Taurus Scorpio polarity. And so in my case, this is the 7th house and the 1st house. So the balancing act here with this lunar eclipse in my case has to do with needing to allow there to be a balance between what works for me emotionally, right? Because here's the moon, has to do with what we're comfortable with on an emotional level. And so what works for me emotionally, because the 1st house is me, that's my identity, that's the Sonja identity, right? That's what I identify with. So I need to get comfortable. I need to be comfortable. I need to feel safe, right? And I need to balance that out with, the relationships that are coming in on a very unexpected level, and how they're playing out and what's going on with other people as well. There might be things going on with other people that are unexpected in my, in their lives. And I'm experiencing this unexpectedness through other people. And I need to make sure that I balance it out with feeling emotionally safe and empowered as I'm in relationship with those other people, right? So that's my upgrade for the lunar eclipse. And of course, the lunar eclipse is also happening on a day of my birthday, which means that makes it extra powerful for me because it's part of my my birthday year. And so this year for me will be definitely an emotional year. There will definitely be me needing to self-regulate a lot, me needing to soothe and nurture myself a lot on an emotional level, and become very responsible. Because remember, the ruler of Scorpio is Pluto in Capricorn. So I need to be very responsible for how I am communicating with myself, with other people, how I regulate myself on an emotional level, being less reactive and more responsive in my life. Which reminds me that I just did a webinar called React versus Respond, which I might share, on my webinar page as well, if you guys are interested. I know I've shared it before, but I did another version, and it was a really good webinar. So if anybody's interested, let me know, and I'll put it on my webinar page. And that's, that's very much also about the moon placement, right? Around like, how do I react? How do I not react? And how do I respond? How do I respond versus react, right? And so So yeah, so this eclipse chart here is definitely going to be a powerful one for me for this year. And then of course we also want to look at where's Venus. So Venus is in the 6th house at the time of the eclipse. So that has to do with my health and well-being. So I definitely want to be conscious of my physical body and my well-being, and really make sure that I have a lot of balance within my day-to-day work and my day-to-day experience, that I really honor myself, not just on a physical level, but also on a emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a mental level, like really approach my day-to-day life on a more holistic level. And then, with Mars being in Pisces here in the 5th house, I need to start to take more intuitive actions around my self-expression and my creativity. So this might be connected to the book that I'm currently writing and trying to get published, right? So this is something that I'm going to be engaging with this year in a great way, in a big way. Now, the other big news with this lunar eclipse is Saturn, of course, because Saturn squares not only the moon nodes, which Saturn already squares the moon nodes and will do for a long time, until June, I think. But with this eclipse chart, it doesn't just square the moon nodes, it also squares the eclipse. So Saturn becomes a really important need for us to pay attention to, and to see how do we become more self-responsible in our lives, especially when it comes to the things we focus on in terms of our mind, our visions, our ideas about things, about life. How can we be more self-responsible about what we're thinking about, what we're putting out there for ourselves to live into, the future that we want to be creating. And because it's squaring this axis, we need to also look at the opposite side here at this empty leg here in Leo, and also that house area for ourselves. So for me, I need to really make sure that I focus some of my vision and some of the things that I want to be creating. I need to focus them into a more public place, become more public about things, and be really self-expressed publicly with certain things, right? So in a mature way, right? In a mature way. Saturn always wants us to be mature, self-responsible, and we want to be aware of being rigid, right? So we don't want to become rigid with Saturn. We don't want to have a set of rules that we live by, because that's rigid, right? Because rules, not that rules are bad, but rules need to be flexible, because if they're not flexible, they are rigid. And when they're rigid, we might be applying a rule to something that's not necessarily a good idea to apply it to. So each moment is a different moment. And Saturn and Capricorn always teach us to be present in the present moment, and to understand what works and what doesn't work in that present moment in a very real, truthful way. And if we're ignoring that, if we're ignoring what actually works, and we're just going with the rule that we have set for ourselves, then we're not doing ourselves or anybody else any favors, right? And so that's just something to be aware of with Saturn having such a strong component in this lunar eclipse chart. All right, now Mercury is retrograde at the time of the eclipse as well. So there is some kind of need to re-communicate certain things, to reconnect to something from the past, possibly. And then also what we have to understand with this lunar eclipse is this really resonates back to the last lunar eclipse that we had in November, when we had the lunar eclipse in 27 degrees of Taurus, which was also a Taurus Scorpio polarity. And as you can see, this is in a very similar degree, right? This is 25 degrees. And in November, it was in 27 degrees. So this was already hitting certain things in your own birth chart in this very similar way that it will on May 16th with this eclipse. So also remember or think back what happened in the end of November Well, I think it was mid-November. So whatever happened, whatever unfolded from the last lunar eclipse in November up until now, this unfolding that took place, and it can be connected again to a relationship in our lives. It can be connected to a financial situation in our lives. It can be connected to our own resources or other people's resources, our own talents, other people's talents, anything like that. We're now moving to the next level with that stuff, right? Because with this eclipse, because it's now turned the other way, right? The moon is now in Scorpio, and the sun is now in Taurus. So we're getting more of an awareness and of how far we've come since November, and we're also getting more of an awareness of like, where do we need to possibly, shift our own vibrational energy in order to move into greater abundance and more joy with the physical world. Okay, enough said about, the eclipses. Let me, before we go into questions, I just want to share a little bit some of the attachments that we have in the emails as well. This is Leah's page on my website. She is a soul-based astrologer certified by me. She's done all of my courses, my whole curriculum. She's really wonderful, very intuitive. So if you ever need to do a reading, like a 25-minute reading, if you have a question about something, or you want to do like a more full-length reading, Leah is a little bit less expensive than me. So there's that. But then also, if I'm booked out or I don't have time on my calendar and you really need someone to do a reading for you, reach out to Leah, because she's really wonderful. All right. So this is how you can get to her page here with, you go to the services page first, the services tab. And then when you see readings, her reading page should show up here as well. And you click on that, and then that's how you get to her page. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to share was anybody who's interested in learning more about astrology. Of course, I offer a whole curriculum on my website. You can watch all these videos in your own time. And with all of these courses, especially if you're a star member already, you get one free one-on-one tutoring session with me. So for each of the courses that you purchase, you get one-on-one time with me. If you have any questions that come up during watching the astrology courses, you'll get to ask me questions, and I'm happy to support you. And if you need more than one tutoring session, there are other tutoring sessions that are also available for purchase as well. So you can do 25-minute or 1-hour sessions with me, one-on-one tutoring, if you're a student of mine. Okay, then of course, coaching is always available too. And of course, if you're a star member, you get fantastic discounts for coaching with me. Coaching is really wonderful because you get to not just engage with your natal chart on an intellectual level, but with the coaching, we really can go into much deeper territory. We can really address emotional issues. We can address issues that have come up in connection to fear, or in connection to something that's coming up in your life currently that maybe you need to let go of, or something that you're dealing with that requires you to step into a more loving place with yourself. And so the coaching can be really, really beneficial. The other thing that you can also engage with on my website is the webinars. If you haven't seen any of these webinars, feel free to watch them. Some of them are on sale right now, so those are the best ones, obviously, to start with if you haven't seen them yet. But they're all great webinars, right? So, and then the last thing I wanted to share was that if you are a member of my online community, the best way to access all of your membership content is to go to your account. And if that doesn't show up, then that means that you're not signed in yet, which means then you have to click on login, and then you log in here, and then this will show up. This is all of your membership content. You can click on each of these links here if you want to read the whole articles or watch the videos. And then if you do purchase a webinar on my webinar page, those webinars will be accessible to you via that webinar tab. Here, you just click here and you go to the webinar tab in your account page, and you can actually download them to your computer, which means you can have access to them forever. Okay. Now, the last thing I'm going to share here is that if you want to ask a question for any of the webinars, for any of the forecasting forums, you can do that here on your account page via the forecasting forum tab. You just click here on that link where it says submit a question here. And if you're not a star member yet, then just register here for this month only. And then you will get an email sent to you that will allow you to submit a question via email. Or you can also just email me directly as well. That's an option too. Okay, so there's lots of options. So let's talk a little bit about the next forecasting forum before I go into questions. And then, of course, this is something I'm going to email you with the recording as well. So in case you want to take a closer look at all of this, if you have any questions about memberships or anything, always feel free to reach out if you need anything at all. And then as far as the next forum goes, that will be happening on May 21st. So after the eclipses are over, we'll take a look at Jupiter's journey through Aries, which will start on May 10th. So the lunar eclipse will already have Jupiter in Aries. So there's something energetically different there with Jupiter in Aries, because Jupiter is all about expansion and mental and spiritual growth. So we're really going to expand in a very fiery, fast kind of a way, because Jupiter in Aries is very fiery. And so it's a great energy for starting things, for starting something new, right? And so where in your life are you waiting to make a big leap forward, basically, And so we'll investigate that in the next forum by looking at Jupiter and Aries in our own birth charts. And then here are the dates for when that will be, when Jupiter's traveling through Aries. And so that's basically on May 21st. And of course, there was always an early bird special until 3 days before the webinar. And then star memberships are always, of course, least expensive. But if you don't want to join every month, then of course, just doing the early bird special might be the best way to go for you. So, whatever works best, you just kind of need to kind of gauge that a little bit, right, for yourself. All right. So then we have some really awesome questions here that I wanted to address. Maybe because Jude is not here live, I will maybe start with Kathy's question, since Kathy is here live. And then I'll go into the other two questions because the other two people are not here live on the call. So Kathy, I think you are still here. So Kathy had a really fantastic question, actually, which is going to be really wonderful for everybody to hear about, because it is about retrograde phases. And, because Pluto is starting its retrograde phase on April 29th, and then soon after that, we'll have several planets starting their retrograde phases. This question is actually quite relevant, actually, to us right now. So Kathy was asking about, what do you think retrograde can be used for in terms of, what can we do during a retrograde phase? So let me just say this, first of all, is that for those of you who are new to the retrograde phases, is what happens with the retrograde phase is the planet goes in one direction, then it stops, then it goes backwards, then it stops, and then it goes forward again. And that means that planet will move over the same territory 3 times, right? First, when it goes towards the stopping point, then again, when it moves towards backwards and stops again, and then again, when it moves forward again and then moves on, right? So there's three phases of where the planet moves in exactly the same degrees. 3 times. And so what are we doing there? Like, why is this happening? Right. So the idea of a retrograde phase is that we're getting a chance to the first time we're going over that particular territory, we're getting the chance to encounter a new issue, right? Like something's coming up, especially, of course, if you have personal planets in that same area where that planet is going over for the first time. Let's say with Pluto, of course, that area is going to be a small area because it starts to go retrograde at 28.5 degrees and it stops and it goes backwards to 26 degrees of Capricorn, right? So basically this whole back and forth is happening between 26 degrees of Capricorn and 28.5 degrees of Capricorn. So this is a small area. So, but anybody who has like a personal planet within those degrees will experience that Pluto transit moving over there several times. And so the first time it moves over there, it's going to be like, whoa, what's this? This is a new issue. I don't even know what to do. Feels really out of control, right? That's the first time Pluto moves over that particular planet. Then the second encounter, which is the retrograde phase, it will go over a second time. And the second time it goes over, we're already feeling a little bit more familiar with it because we've already experienced it once before. However, this time there's more an internal connection to this. So the second time we move over there, we're feeling internally like this feeling of out of control, or this feeling of needing to be in control or needing to protect ourselves, or this feeling of fear that comes up. We're going to feel that very internally. It's going to feel very personal to us. So it might feel a little bit more intense the second time it goes while it's retrograde, right? But we need to process it internally. So there is a need to really, during the retrograde phase, if you have a personal planet where Pluto is retrograding over, you might want to do some coaching during that time. You might want to do some therapy. You might want to do some kind of modality that helps you process that energy or that transit, right? So that would be recommendable. When it moves over the third time, that's when we can start to implement what we have learned. Because remember, during the retrograde phase, you might learn a thing or two as you're processing through something, right? So as it goes direct again and moves over that same territory for the third time, that's when we have the opportunity to implement what we've learned. And so therefore, because this is not a new lesson anymore, we can then start to go, oh, okay, so let me do this here. This is how I want to move with this. Let me fully surrender here, or let me empower myself in this particular way, right? So we have an idea. The third time we have a much better idea already how we want to move with this energy. Now, if we're not doing the work, however, and this is true with all outer planets, we always want to do the outer planet work, because when we're not allowing ourselves to process what's going on there, we might feel, even the third time when we're encountering the thing the third time, it might still feel really out of control and really disempowering because we haven't done the work. Okay, we're still learning, right? Like even when it moves over the third time, you're still learning something from the experience. It might just be a little bit more unpleasant what we're learning, right? Remember, the soul learns no matter what the experience, whether we are moving with it in the best way possible or the worst way possible. The soul always learns something. So the soul doesn't really mind either way, but the human, of course, the human identity that is connected to these lessons too, that human identity will experience things either a little bit more gentler or a little bit more intense and might be suffering a little bit more, right? So, but remember that we have choices. We have choices in how we want to connect with the energies. Does that make sense, guys, what I'm sharing here about the retrograde? And so, the second time it moves over, it's really an opportunity to process, right? To process internally. And so there are words. So with every retrograde, there are words like revisit, repair, reevaluate, restructure, rewrite. Anything that starts with an RE, we get a chance to redo, reconnect, re-embrace, release, right? So anything that starts with an RE is something that we want to do during a retrograde phase. Now, if you have a planet natally retrograde that is going into a retrograde phase. So for example, with the Pluto retrograde that's starting on April 29th, if your natal Pluto is retrograde in your natal chart, which I have, for example, right? Then the retrograde phase will actually resonate more deeply with you. And you will, because if you have it natally, that means that you're a person who naturally or organically needs to process a lot of stuff, right? So you, if you have a Pluto retrograde natally, you want to go deeper. This feels more personal to you, that energy. It's not something that you only live out in the outside world, but you also live it out internally as well. So there is a greater need for always going deeper within yourself and looking at, you know, what needs to be transformed, where do you need to find a better way to deal with your fears from the past, or with your trauma from the past. So there's always a need to kind of dig into that when you have that natally. Now Kathy is saying, thank you, that was very helpful as usual. You're so welcome, Kathy. Thanks so much. Now, Kathy, did you want me to look at your chart as well to see how that plays out in your chart? Because I do have your chart prepared here. Did you want me to do that? Please. Okay. So let me just pull up Kathy's chart here real quick. Let's see. I think Kathy's chart is the last one here. There's Kathy. Okay. So let me actually make that a little bit smaller. So as you guys can see, different charts look different, right? Even though they still have the same symbols on them, they're just visually just a little bit different, right? So this is Kathy's chart here. And let me actually pull your chart up here as well in front of me. And so let me just see. So in your case, Kathy, if we look at Pluto, right, we can see that Pluto is here in your, oh, you don't have any numbers here for the houses. That's interesting. So this is Kathy's first house. This is her second house, third, fourth, fifth house. So Pluto is natally in Kathy's fifth house. And by transit, Pluto is in Kathy's 10th house, because Capricorn is here on the 10th house cusp, the MC, which is the career point. And so Pluto is in 28 degrees and this is 15 degrees. So it has to be a little bit further in. So it would be right here in her 10th house. So Kathy, for you, of course, this retrograde phase is very much, or the station phase is very much connected to self-expression and leadership, right? And creativity, you know, needing to empower yourself creatively and let go of any fears that are holding you back from fully stepping into your passion and your power around your own creativity and your own self-expression, right? And then, of course, in the 10th house now, this means you have to become more public with this as well, right? So moving this creativity and the self-expression more into transforming it more into a long-term sustainable thing, right? Because the 10th house has to be with sustainability. It has to do with the legacy that we leave behind. So, so Kathy, what are you working on right now? Are you working on anything that you're leaving behind currently? Any legacies that we should know about? Any paintings? Any, yes, art and a book. Fantastic. Okay. One fantastic. So, but, you know, with the station, you know, you might become aware or be confronted of whatever is holding you back still from fully stepping into your own authority around this, right? And if you recognize any limitations that you experience within yourself, or any limitations that you experience out there in the world, just make sure that you're surrendering any fears that you have about that, and just know that there is a process already at play that is going to help you to take things to the next level, right? So to trust, it's very important for you, Kathy, to trust that process when it comes to that legacy that you want to leave behind. Does that make sense, Kathy? You love that message? Time to step away from being a hermit. Yes. And look, it doesn't mean that you have to, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily change who you are completely, but you want to make sure that you pay attention to what is coming from fear, right? Like, why are you wanting to stay small or stay a hermit? What are these fears that are keeping you in that place? And just slowly release the fears around that. And again, if that's something that's hard to do on your own, then reach out to people that can support you with that. Whether that's doing a coaching session with me, or whether that's like doing that with a therapist, or having a healer or a modality with someone that supports you in letting go of these fears around being an authority figure, being a public figure, letting go of these fears, because without letting go of these fears, it's going to be difficult to step into this fully passionate, alive place that you really want to live from, right? So let's go back to our question page here. Let's go to Jude's question, because Jude had a question about the full moon Libra Aries polarity and the Pluto station. And so I just wanted to answer that. She said she's been feeling extremely stuck and overwhelmed, and she doesn't know where to start. And she would appreciate any help to where or how this will affect her chart. So let's take a look at Judy's chart here. So this is Judy. And of course, so Judy has a lot of stuff in Gemini, as you can see here. And as we know, there's a lot of planets in Pisces right now here in the 6th house. So if we look at Judy's chart, what we can see is that these Pisces planets in the 6th house, which of course is her day-to-day routine, her day-to-day work, everything that she does on a daily basis, her routine stuff. That Pisces energy requires her to sort of be in a flow, to trust, to not push, to slow down, to really pay attention to her intuition, to her feeling body. And all these planets in Pisces are squaring her Mercury, Sun, and South node right here, right? Because we have Neptune and Jupiter in a late degree of Pisces right now, squaring these planets. So a square, of course, is always an invitation to stretch ourselves, and we need to grow, right? There's a growth process. And so that can feel a little uncomfortable, of course, whenever we need to grow. And so what Jude is experiencing, this overwhelm that she's experiencing, is this feeling of like the mind, right? Because she has a lot of mental energy with all that Gemini here. The mind is just trying to do its best to not lose its power, right? To kind of like be like, I got this. I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. But yet all this Pisces energy is saying to Jude and to her mind, hey, relax. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Be present. Just stay in touch with your feeling body. Stay in touch with your physical body. Like just be. And Jude might feel a little uncomfortable with that because her mind tends to be very hyperactive, right? So there is a discrepancy between this Pisces energy and between that Gemini energy that she's currently experiencing. And so that feels overwhelming. And so the thing to do here is slow down, and in particular, slow down your mind, like allow your mind to rest, to trust the process, to trust life. allow the mind to take a little bit of a back seat here, and to not over rev, and to not create problems where there are none. And to just go with your intuition more, make time for meditation, make time for walks in nature, make time for being still, sitting still for a moment, and really just check in with your breathing. That will definitely help. Take breaks, right? Take breaks in your workday. Now you also have Pluto, transiting Pluto, and the stationing Pluto, which is in Capricorn, which is here in your 4th house, right here. So this stationing Pluto is squaring your Neptune as well, and has been for several years now. So there is also a stretching process that goes on where you need to empower yourself a little bit more and trust your own feeling body a little bit more, rather than being so idealistic about things, because you have a lot of air in your chart, Jude, right? Like with the Libra rising, and then that Neptune in Libra, and then all those planets in Gemini. You have a very highly idealistic personality, where you see things in a very, like you see things and you want them immediately to be the way you see them, right? Because you have this ability to see things. Now, the thing with idealism is it's a wonderful thing to be idealistic. And it's also important to ground our idealism in reality, right? To say, the idealism is my trajectory into the future where I want to move towards. But the way we ground it in reality is by being completely honest with ourselves, with where we're currently at. And so Pluto in Capricorn in the 4th house is really trying to ground you in the reality of where you're currently at, and to really honor that reality, honor yourself, honor your emotions, honor your feelings, honor your body, honor your whatever brings you safety, right? So that's something that needs to be honored. And then the other thing is, you want to really look at sustainability rather than moving fast, right? Because air signs like Gemini in particular likes to move really fast. So rather than trying to move fast, think about what is sustainable in my life. Because with Pluto here, you really need that sustainability to feel safe. And then also Saturn in Aquarius is in your 5th house, and that is squaring your moon currently. So again, there we need to look at sustainability, but we also need to look at slowing things down just a little bit. And because Saturn is in Aquarius, that slowing down needs to be a mental slowing down mentally in terms of like what we're trying to create in the future. And so Saturn is probably making you feel a little bit stuck, with that square to the moon, and then also the opposition to your natal Pluto here, right? So we have that opposition to the Pluto, we have the square to the moon. So that kind of creates almost like a T-square with that transiting Saturn. You do have Saturn trining your Mercury and your Sun and your South Node. So that's a good thing that there's a trine as well. But it basically just means to find a way to think more realistically, to think more what's real, what's sustainable, what's doable, what's actually doable. Not where can I push myself more to do more, but what's actually realistic to do without having to push myself, without having to, feel overwhelmed, right? What's realistic. So these are just some things that you want to keep in mind, Jude, as you are moving with these transits. And, get into your body as well, because there's so much mental energy here. Get into your physical body and allow yourself to really listen to what the body needs. Listen to what your intuition tells you. Listen to what your physical body tells you. and really allow yourself to mellow the mind a little bit and find ways to do that. There are many modalities out there that help you to do that. If you want any suggestions, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'll think about some things, but definitely, obviously, what I already mentioned, meditation, walks in nature, guided meditations, and then also just anything that helps you stay present in the here and now, any modality that helps you with that. So, the Sedona method that I use in my coaching is really powerful to help you be present in the here and now. So there's all sorts of things, right, that you could do. All right. Now, next question that we want to answer here is Mary wanted to know, how does the energy of the upcoming solar eclipse impact me personally? So let's take a look at Mary's chart. And we have here another really beautiful example of a different astrology chart that looks completely different from other people's charts. But I really like this one. This is really pretty, very delicate looking. Now, Mary, you have, so one thing that I see here with the solar eclipse is that the solar eclipse is exactly on top of your natal moon in Taurus, because you have the natal moon in 11 degrees of Taurus. So there's definitely a new beginning for you around either connected to emotional connections with other people or connected to home or family. It is in your 10th house still. So this something in connection with how you want to feel like how you want to show up in the world as a nurturer or as a giver. And so there's something around your long-term goals or your career where you need to step into maybe a position or a relationship that has a bit more of a give and take, where you feel more like there's a giving and a receiving that's happening in that, and really that there is some ability for self-care within those long-term goals and within that career. So that might be a new beginning of some sort. Now, the moon, of course, rules Cancer, and Cancer is your rising sign. So I would say that is something connected to you personally, to a personal goal, or to like definitely a new beginning of some sort, right? Because it's connected to the first house and it's connected to the eclipse. So those two things. And then I also wanted to point out that the lunar eclipse in May resonates very much back to the November eclipse that happened in last year. And both of those eclipses are connected to this Uranus Sun Mercury opposition that you have here in your natal chart. And so I just wanted to point that out to you in case, you can think of something that already got started in November of last year when that eclipse was conjunct your Sun and Mercury, where the moon was conjunct this and opposed Uranus. And then now with the next lunar eclipse, the moon will be conjunct Uranus here in Scorpio. And the sun will be conjunct your Sun Mercury conjunction here. So basically, there's some kind of awareness that you're gaining at the time of the lunar eclipse of how far you've come in your relationship with being completely yourself, or being your unique self out there in the world, and in terms of your own self-expression, right? Because Uranus is in your 5th house, which has to do with self-expression. And your Sun and Mercury are in your 11th house, which has to do with like-minded people out there in the world, groups of people, networking, connecting. And so it's a much more social, this is a very social area here out there in the world. And this can be social too, but it's more connected to you personally on an individual level, right? This is more connected to the collective up here. So there's some kind of awareness that you're gaining with how you are showing up out there in the world, what's important to you. Yeah. And your own personal values, how you can connect more fully to those. And so I just wanted to mention that as well, even though you only asked about the solar eclipse, but the lunar eclipse is also going to be a very important one for you. All right, Mary. Okay, so I think we covered all of the questions. So I'm just going to go to this last page here. So Deb is saying, thank you, Sonja, very much for this informative, very much appreciated. You're very welcome, Deb. Thanks for always showing up so consistently and loyally. I always love having you on my calls. It's really wonderful always to have you there. And yeah, this is, about next month's forum. If anybody wants to join us again next month, we'll be covering the Jupiter in Aries. And yeah, if you have any feedback for me, if anybody's watching, whether you're watching this as a recording or whether you're watching this live, if you have any feedback for me in terms of like what worked for you, what didn't work for you, anything that you like to let me know about, please email me at info@astrologercoach.com and just write feedback in the subject line. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today. And thanks for hanging in there. If you're still here, we went over just a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that I was able to answer everybody's question. So you guys have a fantastic weekend. For those of you who celebrate Easter, have a fantastic Easter Sunday. And yeah, it's great having you here. So all my love to all of you. And we'll see each other again soon. All right. Thanks, Alan. Bye-bye. Bye, guys.